were nomadic hunter-gatherers. We were there for about 190,000 years. Then we went into the agrarian age, where we were planting and farming. We were there for about 10,000 years. About 200 years ago, we went into the industrial age, where we were in factories, we were machines, we were teaching people to be automated, do what they were told. And then, about 30 years ago, we went into the digital age with very little time to adjust physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually to those changes. Many people have felt like they were banging their head against the wall against this upswing of technology. And while life has gotten better in many arenas, for some people, they feel like they've just been drowning. That they've just been drowning. And they're doing everything they can just to keep up. So, how have we been dealing with this? Not very well. We're one of the most addicted societies of all time. We have crippling debt, divorce, obesity, other lifestyle diseases. We're not dealing with the demands on our physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual work very well. So, as we go through today, I want you to keep in the back of your mind, what is it that we as leaders and our teams are bringing to the conversation of work in the workplace? I love this little cartoon because many times people are feeling like we're 20% water and 80% stress. However, around the world, the 80 billion people that there are, they're yearning for something more than that top-down, bottom-line, get-it-done work world. They're actually yearning to be able to bring their whole self to the workplace, to be able to make a difference. This gentleman, Klaus Schwab, is the founder and chairman of the World Economic Forum. And he says that our job is to be able to take a look at what's going on with technology and remember that it was created by people for people and to put people first. We can get sucked into believing that the latest, greatest innovation is the thing that's going to save our businesses. Well, actually, it's not. It's our people. So what does all of this look like in the workplace? People are saying that they feel overwhelmed, stressed out, unappreciated, that they're not able to work on the things that matter to them the most, that they're not making a contribution to making the world a better place. Burned out. Let me share with you a couple of the different ways that burnout shows up. In health problems, burnout has a massive negative impact on your physical and mental health. Whether you're experiencing back pain, depression, heart disease, obesity, or you're just getting sick a lot, you need to consider the role that work is playing in this. Cognitive difficulties. Research shows that stress hammers the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of executive decision making. It impacts your memory, your decision-making abilities, emotional control, and focus. Difficulty at work and in personal relationships. Stress bleeds over into everything that you do, particularly how you interact with people. Even when you feel like you're keeping your stress under control at work, it can rear its ugly head at home. Often, it's your relationships that suffer. Stress makes many people more likely to snap at others, lose their cool, and get involved in silly, unnecessary conflicts. Others are more inclined to withdraw and avoid people, even those that they care about. Taking work home with you. You know that sickening feeling when you're laying in bed worrying whether or not you forgot something really important? Fatigue. Burnout often leads to exhaustion because of the toll stress takes on your mind and your body. The hallmarks of burnout fatigue are waking up with no energy after a good night's sleep, drinking large amounts of caffeine to get you through the day, or having trouble staying awake at work. I mean, honestly, our addiction to caffeine to keep us going, it's almost like a religion, right? Negativity. Burnout can lead you to be very negative even when you're usually a positive person. Decreased satisfaction. Burnout almost always leads to a nagging sense of dissatisfaction. Projects and people that used to get you excited no longer do so. This dip in satisfaction makes it very difficult to get your work done. A loss of motivation. You might complete the tasks and even complete them well, but the motivation that drives you is gone. Instead of doing work for the sake of the work, we do the work because we're afraid. Afraid of letting someone down, afraid of getting fired, maybe even letting others down. Performance issues. People who burn out are usually high achievers, so when their performance begins to slip, not everybody notices. And then poor self-care is the last. I see this one a lot. Life is a constant struggle against momentary satisfaction and actually delayed satisfaction, and the things that are not good for us. When you experience burnout, your self-control wanes, and you have less ability to say no to something that's not good for you. This is largely due to the way that stress compromises your decision-making and your self-control. So it's a pretty big deal. And when we look at the workplace and we talk about engagement, there are 3 ways that Gallup looks at this. Highly disengaged, disengaged, and highly engaged. In the US, it's about 30% of workers that are engaged and 70% that are not. So 1 in 3 roughly. Worldwide, the statistics are 13% are highly engaged. That's almost 1.5 person. There's an enormous, enormous cost to your business of having disengaged employees. Actually, there's a lot of money left on the table with disengaged employees. As we go through this morning, I'll be building the business case for why it matters, even though it's challenging to do, and a lot of times we're left with like, I don't even know where to start. Well, we'll go through some of that today. So as business leaders, why should you care? Because the way people feel at work profoundly impacts their effectiveness in their performance. Not the way they think, the way they feel. And then it's on us to create environments that support people feeling good about themselves, good about the organization, and good about the difference that they're making in the world. This gentleman, Pat Lencioni, has written a number of very good books on this topic. The first one was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He later came out with this book, The Advantage, and he said, I don't want to focus on the dysfunctions. I actually want to focus on what it takes to have engaged employees be the competitive advantage. So he says organizational health will one day surpass all the other disciplines in business as the greatest opportunity for improvement and competitive advantage. Now, a lot of times when I go in and I meet with prospects and meet with teams, we're looking at what is it going to take to have an environment where the working styles and behaviors support the business. It starts with respect. Respect for the self and respect for others. High respect for self and low respect for others is a hostile, aggressive kind of parent stance. Respect for others and low respect for self is kind of that child passive position. If you're low respect for self and low respect for others, it's just sociopathic. It's aggressive, manipulative. It's just not good, right? What we're looking for is high self-respect and respect for others. This is an assertive, not necessarily aggressive, but assertive way of being that's adult to adult, and it produces a win-win. In the parent-child dynamic, which is very, very common in the workplace, it leads to resentment and a sense of entitlement. People that are on our teams that are there like little baby birds, pa, 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 feed me, tell me what to do, I don't want to make any mistakes. And the bosses that are there are going, why can't these people just do what they're supposed to do? So what we're looking for is, how do we create adult to adult, high respect for self and high respect for others? As we go into reimagining talent and your workforce, we become increasingly concerned with how we bring on team members and retain those team members. It's all about getting and keeping top talent. And Carlos spoke to this in his presentation, the importance of onboarding. Well, it's probably one of the most important things you can do. And if you have an environment in your workplace that's highly engaged, it attracts unto itself. So when we're recruiting, and people have the experience of an engaged workplace and an engaged workforce, they can feel it when they walk in the door. And then when you go on to your onboarding process, they can experience it even further. And the studies show that if you have an engaged workplace and a positive culture, women will stay 97% of the time. Only 3% will leave if the workforce is an engaging workforce. For men, it's 23%. So if you have an engaged workforce and people experience that, you're more likely to reduce your recruitment and your costs. However, we can't really talk about the workforce unless we're looking at generational intelligence. Never before in the history of the work world have we had 5 generations in the workplace, working side by side with different values, different needs, different wants, and different beliefs. So as owners and managers, business leaders, our ability to understand what each one of these different generations needs and what's important to them is a very important skill set for us to be able to develop. The last generation, the Generation Z, the Linksters, are just starting to enter the workforce. But all the talk about millennials, those millennials, even the youngest of those, are entering in their mid-30s, and they already have positions in management as owners and as leaders. So knowing what's important to them is going to be very important for you. And they don't want what the previous generations wanted. No, I'm 60. They don't want what I wanted. They're unwilling to work for organizations that don't respect them or that they don't respect. They're unwilling to work for organizations that don't care about the environment or have a purpose greater than themselves. And they don't want to work for companies that don't value the contribution that they are. Many times when I hear people talking about millennials, I think back to how I was when I was that age, and I'm like, I don't think it's millennials, I think it's just human beings. People want what they want. Nothing wrong with that. In Daniel Pink's book, A Whole New Mind, he talks about the need for poets, artists, creatives in the next age that we're entering. So we talked about the agrarian age, the industrial age, the information digital age. What we're entering into now, with AI taking care of most of the computing and most of the knowledge that needs to be assembled, is the imagination age. In the imagination age, creativity and collaboration are the new currency. However, when people are exhausted or they're burnt out and they don't feel valued, creativity and imagination for innovation is not present. Or if it is, it's withheld. With disrupt in every single industry now, from the waves of technology and telecommunications, we must be willing and ready to look at what people can bring. And what people bring is the ability to cognitively synthesize ideas and generate ideas, and the emotional intelligence that engages the workforce. As we go on, I want to take you through an exercise that we use with our clients at ActionCOACH called Above and Below the Line. So this line represents your choice in any given moment of how you're going to respond to the circumstances that life has thrown your way. So what kinds of things are below the line? Blaming, making excuses and denial, blaming the economy, blaming our team, blaming our bosses, blaming our clients, blaming our vendors, blaming the weather, blaming the and it goes on and on. Or making excuses. We're all familiar with the I'm late because the traffic was bad and there was an accident excuses. But there are many other examples of excuses. And then denial. Denial typically shows up in a business as the unwillingness to take a look at the things that we know we need to be taking a look at. For instance, if we're unaware of what our revenues were 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or we're unclear about how many, as Carlos said, leads it takes to actually turn and convert a client. These are areas where examples of denial. Above the line, we have ownership, accountability, and responsibility. Responsible for actually doing what it is that you're supposed to be doing, for taking action. Being accountable for the results, and then taking ownership. Now, responsibility, that's your job description. Accountability is, I can count on you to actually do what you're supposed to do. Ownership, though, comes from the heart. You cannot impose ownership. And every one of us knows the people on our team that actually own the results of our business and its performance the way that we as owners do. Below the line, we have what I call victim of circumstances, or at the effect of the circumstances, and all of the reasons why not. Above the line, we have the condition in which results can happen, and we're victorious over those circumstances. Now, I will tell you, of all the plethora of tools that we have within ActionCOACH, if I only had one tool that I could use with a client, this would be it. I have seen this simple concept turn businesses around more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times. So I'll give you a little story. I have a client who owned a decorating finishes. They had fabrics and they had doorknobs and the kinds of blinds and things like that. He came from Venezuela, where they had taken away his chicken packaging plant, into the States and bought a small business for $500,000. I met him shortly after that, and he took that business during the recession from $500,000 to $1 million, $1 million to $2 million, and 2 to 4.2 in 3 years. Now think about it for a second. His client, that real estate industry and decorating industry and design industry was decimated here in South Florida during the recession. So how did he do that? And the other clients would ask him, like, how did you do that? He said, I operated above the line. I taught my team to operate above the line. Every day, I invested 2 hours a day working on my business. The rest of the day, from 10 to 6, I was available for the business. But above and below the line and working on my business was what allowed me to do the impossible during the recession. So he actually credits just this concept with him being able to do that kind of results. Another client, upset because their work, they did renderings, was being taken from them by the Chinese market, crying one day at lunch, all upset. I said, I want you to do something for me. Go back to the office and do this exercise. Jody, this exercise isn't going to help us. It's like, what are you talking about? I said, trust me. Just go back to your office and do this exercise and do it thoroughly. Within a quarter, they had regained that money and had turned that business around. It's not the circumstances. It's what we bring to the circumstances that makes a difference. So above the line, we have power, and below the line, we have no power. One last thing before we leave this concept of above and below the line. Below the line is largely habitual, unconscious, programmed responses to life. We don't even know we did it. It takes awareness and a conscious effort to operate above the line. Below the line is a child's response to life. Above the line is an adult's response to life. And it takes something because it is unconscious. It takes a question. The neuroscientists tell us to access the adult in the brain, you have to ask it a question. So a question that you might want to ask is, have I done my best to take ownership, accountability, and responsibility in this situation or today? So my request is that you all be willing to operate above the line today. Do you accept my request? Yes. All right, that was really lame and weak. Right? If we operate above the line, taking ownership, accountability, and responsibility, we can actually create the businesses that we're after this year and beyond. But it's going to take operating as an adult, responding as an adult, and taking ownership, accountability, and responsibility, and letting go as much as possible where we blame, make excuses, and are in denial. Right? So one more time, can I get everybody's agreement to operate above the line, at least just for today? Yes. All right, that was a much better response. Okay, thank you. Okay. This is what we call the cycle of business, and you see that it actually goes around in a clockwise fashion. Now, I've probably seen this slide hundreds of times, but I can tell you that I operated, especially in the early years, trying to take care of the business, trying to take care of the clients, and trying to take care of the team, like a mess. How I realized that I was doing that was one day one of the team members said, "Could you go over this with me?" And I said, "Okay, let me see. I can do that with you on Thursday at 3:30. And I saw the look on her face, and I was like, oh my God, I'm doing that. I'm making the business and the client more important than she is. And I know better, but I was doing it anyway. It takes something for us in the heat of, as Carlos said, the wheels falling off, to remember that our job as leaders is to train our team, to make sure that they have all the resources they need to be successful, to train and develop them to be the best at what they are wired to do, to recruit well, to onboard well, and to retain the talent that we have. They will take care of the clients and customers. And the clients and customers take care of the business, which then takes care of us. And it goes round and round and round. It's not easy to do, but it's absolutely critical, particularly now, as we're moving into this imagination age where innovation and people are the most important things, where creativity and collaboration are our currency. When we're busy and the buck stops here, it's hard to remember that sometimes. But this is a great image, and as Doug said and Carlos said, we'll be sending you out the slides. So many times people will want to take this one and just pin it up there on the wall. The number one thing is people. If you build your people, they will build your business. Because we as Carlos said, 24 hours in a day, we can't scale our business ourselves. We need people to help us scale our business. So another one that I actually love, because I see this a lot in businesses where they have substituted loyalty for performance. And how do you know you need to make a change in the people area? First and foremost, are you happy? And secondly, would you enthusiastically rehire every single person on your team knowing what you know today? That's a tough question. But as Jim Collins says, how do you grow your business? You get the right people in the right seats on the bus doing the right things. And I add, at the right time for the right reasons. So we really need to take a look at this. As it comes to engagement, as it comes to disengagement, or actively disengaged. Now, I can tell you a little story about a client that I work with in an Engage and Grow program right now. When I met the owner, she said, I have 2 people that I'm going to bring into this executive training program. And I'm having a lot of trouble with them. One of the guys was this great big huge guy who was like, I'm not interested in this. I'm going through the motions. This is stupid. Why are we doing this? And the other guy was just totally silent. I could see why she was thinking she had trouble with these guys. Now, as the program went on, and we're in our 5th or 6th week now, I started to see this guy open up. The first thing we did was look at behaviors. And then stories. And as he told his story, we got to know him a little bit. He also added in that he started to feel respected and valued in the company. What I have found is that the level of cynicism and resignation that you see in someone on the team is in direct proportion to the amount of passion and caring that they have, and then something happened. So if we can go in and actually heal those wounds from the past, you can hold on to the intellectual capital that you have in your company. It's just a matter of being willing to go in there and do that kind of messy work. Now, he's a superstar. The other guy, I don't know yet, because he's still withdrawn and quiet. I've seen at the end of programs where that has turned around. But sometimes what happens when you look at engagement is you find that, you know what? They're just not engaged. They don't care. And the best thing that can happen is that they actually leave your company. So engagement, these are the qualities of engagement. Commitment, involvement, passion, energy, enthusiasm. Our current measure of engagement is, are they willing to stay late? Isn't that our current measure of engagement? Well, willing doesn't always equal able. Sometimes people are miscast in their roles and they just simply don't have the energy at the end of the day to generate another hour or two. Maybe they have kids, maybe they have something else that they're doing, a class at night, who knows. But we really need to take a look at, is this a good measure of engagement? That someone's willing to stay late? Probably not, right? Nearly 75% of the people who were surveyed by the Human Performance Institute in 2010 said that they were not sure that they could actually generate enough energy to take on one more thing in the workplace. So their ability and their willingness may not be the exact measure of their ability to be engaged in your company. So what would it look like if we actually brought involvement, commitment, passion, and enthusiasm and energy to our companies? Now, a quick story. I have a client, Scientific Instruments, and the owner called me one day and she said, you know, we have this employee, he's been working with us for 25 years, and his supervisor wants me to fire him. What can we do? Can you help? And I said, well, let's just take a look at his profile. I want to see how he's wired. Maybe there's a disconnect between the two of them. Let's just take a look. So I'm reading through his profile, and everything about this guy is people. So I said, well, what's his role? She said, oh, he's inventory manager in the warehouse. And I said, I can tell you exactly why she wants to fire this guy. He keeps coming out and talking to people because you have him in a warehouse. Meanwhile, he's wired for people. Now, if they had fired him and he went out to look for another job, what do you think they would have hired him for? They would have hired him to be in the warehouse doing inventory because that's his experience and that's his skill set. Meanwhile, he would have been just as miserable in the new job and just as disruptive in the new job as he was in that one. So she said, what can I do? I said, well, do you have a position in customer service or account manager? Yeah. I said, well, if I were you, I would move him to customer service. He knows your inventory, he knows your products, he knows the players. Why would you throw away that intellectual capital? So that's what they did. Made all the difference in the world. So that was great, Megan. When people are cast in the right role, they can be engaged. So let's look at what is actually costing. Research from Gallup has said that disengaged employees cost U.S. businesses $500 billion a year. That's astounding. You can't even relate to a number like that. So let me drill it down. The study says that for every $10,000 in salary that you pay someone on your team, costs you $3,400 if they're disengaged. So let me say that again. $3,400 for every $10,000 in salary for someone who's disengaged. You almost want to pay them to stay home, right? And you might think it might be a good idea. But actually, think about it. That's $17,000 for a $50,000 salary. It's a lot of money. So when we look at disengagement, we want to look at, is this somebody who can actually be brought up to being engaged? Remember that level of cynicism and resignation, direct proportion to passion and caring. Or is it somebody who's never going to care and they really just need to go? And if that happens, it's okay. There's not great people walking down the street every single day, but they do walk down the street. And if you have a company that has an engaged culture, you have a better chance of finding them and keeping them in your business. Okay, this one is a great cartoon. I love this cartoon. Obviously, all kidding aside, we're not going to give up on productivity and profitability. That would be silly. But if we take a look at actually engaging them and making sure that they're happy, that they have what they need to win, then we actually can impact our productivity and profitability. You know, Peter Drucker said that most of us are working with knowledge workers. And what that means is that they know more than we do about, say, marketing or finance. So we can't go in and tell them, okay, do this and do it this way. That means that we live and die by their engagement, how connected they are emotionally to our business. It's a totally different world than the world of somebody in the industrial age where you said, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, and they just did it. When people know more than we do, and we want them to know more than we do, otherwise we can't grow, then we're entirely dependent on their engagement in our company. This is a video course that you can see the actual link for. Doug will be sending this out in the email that goes out tomorrow. And there's a fee for the course, but with the code JJ1, that course is free for you. And it's pretty, actually, I've watched it twice. I think it's excellent. It's got Mark Thompson, Silicon Valley venture capitalist, investor, professor at Stanford. Very interesting guy. I'd never heard of him before, but I want to know a whole lot more about him now. Brad Sugar is the founder and chairman of ActionCOACH. Marshall Goldsmith, which needs really no introduction, but just in case, he's written 40-some-odd books, you know, probably the #1 most well-known executive coach in the world. And then Richard Maloney, who created and is the founder of Engage and Grow. And they have what, in this video book, in this video course, a conversation about engagement and what you can do. So we'll be sharing this with you. And in this video book, Marshall Goldsmith talks us about the story of Alan Mulally and Ford Motor Company. So when Alan came to Ford, and I guess he just left in 2014, they were losing money by the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And when he came in, he said to the executive team, what behaviors is it going to take for us to be #1 in this industry? And they sat down and they talked about it and discussed it, and they came up with 5 behaviors that they said were the ones that were going to actually take them to being #1 in the industry. And he said, okay, we all chose these. Now, these are the ones that we're going to use, and this is how we treat one another. And he had 0 tolerance for bad behavior. Sarcasm, no. Putting people down, no. Cynicism, no. Lying, no. He wouldn't tolerate it. And he credits that with being able to turn Ford Motor Company around. So rather than looking at our values, which are very important and we need and want them, a good starting place for engagement is actually getting together and looking at what are the behaviors that we need to take on in order to take our company to being #1 in our industry, in our world. Maybe not in the whole world, but in our world, right? And you can start by asking, am I engaged? Am I living these behaviors? Am I bringing this forth? Because it starts with you. It starts with you, the person sitting in your seat. Given that you're here, I think it's pretty safe to say that you're interested in growing. Yeah? 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 Well, what got you here won't get you there. In Marshall Goldsmith's book by the same name, he talks about what are the barriers to growth. So if you've read it, you already know. If you haven't read it yet, I'll just tell you real quickly. It's the leader's ego. Let me let that land. The barriers to growth are the business's leader's ego. Sometimes it's the dynamic in the partnership that's the lid on the business. Again, coming back to ego. I want it my way, or no, I want it my way. So I'll tell you, for me, some of you know my background was in emergency nursing before I went into business. And so when I came in, I created this business 14 years ago, I went on a vertical learning curve. I mean a vertical learning curve. I read and learned video, webinars, conferences, like vertical. And I was proving to my peers that I could play on this playing field, that I had what it took to play on this playing field. So as I built a team, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but I was proving that I was smarter, I could do it better, and that no one was going to do it as good as me. I'm not proud of that, but it's true. I had created an environment where the people around me could not thrive. You know, the learned helplessness that Carlos spoke to, having to be number one. Thank goodness I've done enough learning and enough living through the School of Hard Knocks to know it's not about me. It's really about them. And it's about having them be the best that they can be. But this is one of the biggest barriers to our business's growth. Hard to hear, but true nevertheless. So these are the different areas that if we take them on and we address these needs on our team, the physical needs and their physical energy and managing that, the mental energy, the spiritual energy, and the emotional energy, we can create sustainability, security, self-expression, and significance. Now, Brad is fond of saying that the most important job of a leader is to manage the energy in the environment. They used to tell me I took the sunshine away. Again, I'm not proud of that. But when I got upset, when I was angry, when I was disappointed, I took the energy and sucked it right out of the business. So it really matters that we manage the energy of the environments of our team and our workplace. People can only focus on a single thing for about 90 minutes. So breaks actually really make a big difference in the productivity on your team. If you follow Daniel Pink, he has a wonderful book called When, and he talks about the importance of breaks and naps and things like that that actually increase the productivity of your company as opposed to decreasing it. They call it sharpening the sword. So the next one is the emotional energy, and this is really about the psychological safety that you create in the environment. So this is about people feeling valued, people feeling like they matter. Remember I was saying earlier that thinking doesn't drive behavior, logic doesn't drive behavior, feelings drive behavior. The way people feel at work actually drives their behavior. So the emotional energy that is in your business is what's going to make the difference for you to be able to create an environment of psychological safety. This cartoon is really great. I asked employees for more feedback, but after reprimanding them that spoke up, nobody gave us any more feedback. Right, so I thought I'd find some cute little ones here, but actually psychological safety is probably one of the core things. You know, after physical, you know, which Branson says is the foundational piece for engagement, for productivity, for happiness, that they're physically, you know, look at Maslow, physically that people are taken care of. But then in the emotional realm, it's psychological safety. So Google, which is, you know, like you look at the brand, you look at the resources, you look at all the things that Google does for its team members. And one of the sales teams that was at the top and the one that was at the bottom had a 40% difference in their results. You're like, how can this be with all of the resources that Google has to bring to bear on their results? When they dove in and they looked at what was causing the disparity, they found that the team that was performing the lowest didn't have the experience of psychological safety. They didn't believe that their colleagues and their managers had their back. That's a huge impact for something that we can easily do something about, yeah? All of that sits squarely in the realm of emotional intelligence. So remember I was saying Daniel Pink, talking about the imagination age. Our emotional intelligence and our ability to synthesize ideas and generate new ideas is going to be the skill sets to develop. Now, emotional intelligence is messy. Most of the managers and leaders that are out there, they don't want to go there. They've got the wheels falling off. They've got other operational issues that they need to deal with. They don't necessarily want to go in and deal with the emotions of the people that are doing the tasks. However, this is going to be the differentiator as we move forward into this next decade. Our mental energy. Mental energy is all about self-expression. So this is how people can think. So Adriana pointed to something in the physical world that actually impacts their people's ability to think by having clutter removed and boxes and this and that taken out, making a good workspace. But mental energy has a lot to do with, are you cast in the right role? Are you free to actually do the kind of thinking to do a good job and to do a better job? When people do have that, they have the mental energy, building on the physical energy and the emotional energy to be able to produce great results in your company. We use these profiles with our clients, and I will tell you that I wouldn't dream of starting to work with a client if I didn't know these aspects of their nature. Strength Finder looks at how are you naturally wired and in what areas. Is it strategic thinking? Is it influencing? Is it relationship building? Is it in execution? So if you stop and think about a salesperson with a short sales cycle, you'd probably want them to have strengths in influencing. Maybe if they have a longer sales cycle, you want them to have strengths in relationship building. But the way that we bring people on is directly impacted by how well we understand the functions that they will do and the kinds of attributes that a person would have to be good in that role. When people are miscast, they don't have the energy to think. DISC is behavioral. It looks at how do we behave predominantly in the workplace. Workplace motivators. There are 7 of them. If you're motivated by money, you probably think everybody's motivated by money. That's not the case. There are 7 motivators. How to fascinate is how the world sees you as a person. And then talent dynamics has to do with, are you a people side or the process side of business? So as we go back and we look at engagement, it starts with recruitment and onboarding. We use these tools to help our business owners take a look at the job description. What are those attributes? And then go and write an ad that's going to attract somebody who has those attributes. Then they come to a group interview. At the group interview, you'll see the stars. They stand out. Then we profile them before they come in for their second interview to make sure that we minimize the chances of a mishire and that we've actually cast this person, not necessarily based on their experience, but on, are they naturally wired to be good at this role? Because if they care and they're naturally wired, we can train them. Okay? And if all of that is in place and they have that mental energy, that leads to the spiritual energy. And the spiritual energy has to do with significance. When people are at the top of their game, when they're actually doing work that's meaningful for them, they know that they're cared about, you can have significance in the business. Now, for all the talk about millennials, they really care about the purpose of your business. They really care about what you're up to in the world bigger than just the job that you have or that you do. They derive their meaning from how valued they are and the difference that they make. So I ask you, what is the problem that your business solves for your customer? Just take a moment and sketch that out. What is the problem you solve for your customer? Okay. Now the invitation is that you actually craft that story, because if people know the problem that you solve for your customers, you can put that into both your engagement and your marketing. So I invite you to take that in 2019 and just start to create the story of the problem that you solve for your customers, and let your team know what it is, because that's where they get that satisfaction, that significance. Here's some of the outcomes from engaged teams. This slide builds the business case for why invest in doing this. Why invest the time, the energy, or the money into doing this? Absenteeism is reduced by 37%. Turnover in high turnover organizations by 25%. Shrinkage or theft by 28%. Errors by 41%. Customer satisfaction up by 10. Productivity 21. Profitability by 22%. It's very clear, and there are tons and tons and tons of research studies that point to the impact of having an engaged workforce. The gentleman who created Medtronics, he says that the reason to have a business is to contribute to an open, just, and sustainable society. Right? He talks about a virtuous circle rather than a vicious circle. Virtuous circle is we take care of our team and they're happy and satisfied. They take care of our customers who are also happy and satisfied, which takes care of the business, and then everyone wins. So what are some of the organizations that are actually doing this out in the world? We're seeing this as a movement, and it actually is a movement. I even saw the other day that there's a book called Engagement for Dummies. So you know the minute they put an Engagement for Dummies book out that it's a movement, right? But this organization, the B Team, was created by Richard Branson. On that team is the CEO of Unilever, the CEO of Salesforce, Arianna Huffington. And what they did was they took the UN's sustainability goals that were created in 2015, and they said, let's tie our business outcomes to the outcomes of solving our world's most pressing issues. And if we align that with these UN sustainability goals, then we can make the kind of difference in the world that our nonprofits and our governments have been slow to be able to resolve. Here's an image of the 17 sustainability goals. If you want to find out more about this, there's all kinds of resources on the B Team website for you to be able to do that, and then also on the UN Sustainability Goals website. It's a plethora, a depth of resources to be able to do that. Obviously, we are tied with number 8, decent work and economic growth, but it could be, and I know that Kelly and Eric's are life below the water, as they care deeply about the water. So these ideas of doing good in business and business for good, making a difference out in the world, have really taken hold. Another one is the B Corps. The B Corps has a certification and a framework for how to become a company that does good, sustainable work that makes a difference in the world and with your teams. Lots of resources on this one as well. All of that leads to the familiar topic of the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. So when you think about, like, really, is this going on out in the world? Yes, corporations are actually caring about this and caring about it deeply. Why? Because businesses are made up of people. And people care. And part of the reason why they care is because over the last 50 years, we've been exposed through TV and radio and the internet to all of the things that are going on out in the world, through social causes, through civil rights, women's rights, poverty, all the kinds of things that are going on out there, and including climate change and the pollution, all the world of everything that's happening out there. And people care about that. And what we're finding is that you can do good and do well. I'm going to quickly introduce you to Masami Santo and to Paul Dunn. And what they've done in B1G1 is turn the philanthropic model on its head. In the old days, it was that there was a few people with a lot of money making donations. What they've done is they've flipped that. And they created a platform where business people can give as little as 1 cent to make an impact somewhere in the world. I'm looking over here at Steve. In Steve's restaurant at Chana's, they make a donation for every single ticket in their restaurant. Every time a party comes to their restaurant, they make a donation here in B1G1 because they were so moved by that when you were introduced, yeah? And so this idea of being able to make a difference around the world through small contributions it has over 175 million impacts. Anywhere from somebody getting, for 1 cent, a package of seeds that can plant vegetables in a garden and feed themselves, through all kinds of other programs. When we met Paul and Masami, who have become good friends, we're like, we need a U.S. project. Because it's easy to take and make an impact in Africa or India. And so they do have some U.S. projects now. In our country, where we still have people that are going hungry, here in Miami, in our backyard, we also have a huge, huge issue of food waste. So their programs in the U.S. are largely focused on food reclamation, because how is the richest country in the world allowing people to starve in its own backyard? Okay? So you'll hear more about Paul during the lunch break. So in wrapping up, Accenture, which is a huge company, they have like 435,000 employees around the world, started in 1984. Back in 2016, as we were right at the, like really having technology take off in significant ways, they wrote a paper called People First. And what they said is everyone is focused on technology. We recommend you focus on people. It's the winning strategy. People first. And if it's good enough for this $71 billion market cap company, it might just be good enough for us. So as business leaders, sometimes we can get overwhelmed by all of the things that need to happen in our businesses. And sometimes we want to contract. We want to make things predictable in our business, thinking that somehow that's going to make us safe and warm and dry. It's not. The disruption in every industry is going to require creativity and innovation. That's going to come from the people on the ground doing the doing in your businesses. He's saying that actually what's required is agility, the ability to respond to circumstances with lively, engaged discernment. So we have to let go of that busy. We have to let go of I'll get to it and actually begin to take on, as a growth strategy, the people on our teams. So what if we don't change at all? Maybe something magical will just happen. So there's strategy, but we know where we started from. We know what causes disengagement. We know our contribution to whether the team is engaged, yes or no. We know the business case for it. What we have to do is begin to look at, and this gave me comfort from Josh Bresham of Deloitte, where he said, come to terms with the fact that understanding our people is just as complex and multifaceted as the marketing job of understanding our customers. But if we do that, then we can have this. Engaged employees actually create that domino effect. So if you bring it in as a growth strategy and really focus on that this year and beyond, it will take care of many of the business challenges that you've been facing. We always like to wrap up with this quote from one of the world's most beloved business philosophers, Jim Rohn. Never wish your life were easier, wish that you were better. And with that, I thank you, and God bless.